Mira's bedroom was a fortress of shadows. The moon poured silver light through her curtains, painting stripes on her patchwork quilt, but her eyes stayed wide open. Again. She counted sheep, they kept tripping over clouds, hummed lullabies, they turned into rock psalms, and even tried breathing like her yoga teacher taught her, in through the nose, out through the mouth. But her thoughts buzzed like angry bees. What if I failed the math test? What if Clara doesn't want to be my friend anymore? What if... Tap, tap, tap. She froze. The sound came from the window. Not the creak of branches or the scratch of a squirrel's claws. This was polite, delicate, like someone knocking with a teaspoon. Mira sat up, heart drumming. Who's there? A small, feathery face pressed against the glass. Two golden eyes blinked at her, round as marbles. A bird? But birds didn't knock. Birds didn't wear tiny waistcoats stitched with constellations either. "Hello, restless dreamer," chirped the creature. Its voice was soft, like wind chimes. "Mind if I come in? The night's getting chilly, and my wings are exhausted from dodging cloud goblins." Mira hesitated. Are you real?" The owl, because that's what it was, though no bigger than her hand, puffed out its chest. "Real as the moon's hiccups now, let's not dawdle. I'm here to take you to the land of floating pillows." Floating pillows? Where else do you think dreams come from? The owl, who introduced himself as Pep, explained that the land of floating pillows was a secret realm where children learned to turn worries into dreams. But we must hurry. The Pillow Queen's hot cocoa fountain stops at midnight, and I never miss cocoa hour. Before Mira could protest, Pip blew a shimmering dust from his wings. Her bedroom melted like watercolor, the walls dissolving into starlight, her bed transforming into a boat woven from moonbeams. And just like that, they were sailing through the sky, leaving her fears tangled in the sheets below. The river beneath them was made of liquid stars, glistening and swirling like melted diamonds. Gentle waves lapped against the boat, and glowing fish leaped in and out, their scales reflecting Mira's wide-eyed wonder. Above them, the sky stretched endlessly, peppered with constellations that pulsed like sleeping heartbeats. They floated past clusters of starfish, tiny creatures with silver limbs that twinkled whenever they spoke. One drifted close, its voice barely more than a whisper. "What do you worry about, little dreamer?" Mira hesitated. "A lot of things." Pip nudged her. "Tell them, it helps." She bit her lip. "I worry about my math test, and that Clara might not like me anymore, and sometimes I think there's something scary hiding in my closet." As she spoke, each worry turned into a tiny glowing orb, drifting from her chest and into the starfish's waiting arms. They cradled the orbs gently before tossing them into the starry river, where they melted into soft, golden light. "Worries are like shooting stars," the starfish murmured. "They fade when you let them go." The boat glided onward, entering the forest of whispers. The trees here had leaves made of bedtime stories, their pages rustling softly. Mira brushed her fingers against one, and a voice, warm and familiar, began telling a tale about a brave little girl who tamed a storm with laughter. She smiled. "This is kind of nice." Pip grinned. "Told you." As they traveled deeper, they reached the Mountain of Murmurs, where a quilted giant dozed, blocking their path. "To pass," he rumbled, "you must answer a riddle. What is lighter than air, but can hold the weight of the world?" Mira thought for a moment. Then she smiled. "A dream." The giant chuckled, shifting aside to let them through. "Clever girl." Beyond the mountain lay Lullaby Lake, its surface rippling with soft music. The notes matched Mira's heartbeat, slow and steady. She breathed deeply, feeling the tension in her shoulders melt away. Then came the cloud goblin trials. A valley filled with cotton candy clouds where mischievous goblins with polka dot ears and soup ladle hats bounced toward them. "Worry, worry, scribble scrabble," one screeched. "What if your socks vanish tomorrow? What if your toast is burnt?" Mira's chest tightened, until she noticed the goblin's shoes were on backward. She giggled. "If my socks vanish, I'll go barefoot. If my toast is burnt, I'll feed it to the ducks." The goblin gasped. You're not playing right." He stomped, puffing into smoke. Pip hooted proudly. "You see, laughter melts worries faster than sunlight." Finally, they reached the Pillow Palace, where the Pillow Queen, a figure woven from stardust and lavender, welcomed them. She showed Mira how to weave her remaining worries into dream pillows, soft and warm. "A rested mind," she said, "turns fear into wonder." When it was time to go home, Mira felt lighter than she had in weeks. As she lay back in her moonbeam boat, drifting toward wakefulness, Pip whispered, "Remember, little dreamer, sleep is an adventure, not a battle." Mira woke in her bed, the silver light still painting stripes across her quilt. But this time, she wasn't afraid. A single feather rested on her pillow, a reminder that the land of floating pillows was always just a dream away. The clock struck midnight in the quiet town of Willowbrook, a place where the stars clung to the sky like glittering dust, and the moon poured its light over cobblestone streets as thick and silvery as cream. Clara Bellamy lay awake in her attic bedroom, her fingers tracing the cracks in the ceiling plaster, each fissure a map to somewhere she'd never been. Sleep had become a fickle friend lately, slipping away whenever she reached for it, leaving her tangled in sheets and a kind of loneliness that hummed like a forgotten tune. It wasn't always like this. Once, her room had been a sanctuary, a nest of quilts and fairy lights, where her mother would sit at the edge of her bed and spin stories about stardust sailors and teapots that sang lullabies. But 3 years ago, the stories stopped. The attic grew quieter, the shadows longer, and Clara's nights stretched into endless hours of counting raindrops on the window pane or rereading old birthday cards tucked beneath her pillow. At night, though, the wind carried something new, the faintest whiff of bergamot and vanilla, sweet and smoky, as if someone had baked a pie made of autumn leaves. Clara sat up, her blanket pooling around her waist. The scent tugged at her, insistent, like a hand beckoning from the dark. She slipped out of bed, her wool socks soundless against the floorboards, and pressed her face to the glass. The street below was empty, save for the flickering glow of the lamppost. But there, nestled between the crooked oak tree and the overgrown hedge of the abandoned Everleigh Manor, was a flicker of gold. A lantern, perhaps? Or fireflies? Clara squinted. No, it was too steady, too warm. A light where no light should be. Curiosity, that old thief of caution, pulled her downstairs. She shrugged on her moth-eaten cardigan, crept past her father's closed bedroom door. He'd been asleep since sunset, exhausted from double shifts at the factory, and stepped into the night. The air tasted of frost and possibility. By the time she reached Everleigh Manor's gate, the gold had multiplied. Dozens of lanterns hung from the oak's gnarled branches, their flames dancing behind colored glass, crimson, sapphire, amber, casting kaleidoscope shadows over a table set for a feast. A tea feast. Tiered platters piled with macarons as pastel as dawn, scones dripping with honey, and a teapot so large it could have bathed a cat. And around the table sat people. Not quite people, Clara realized. Or not only people. A woman with hair like spun lavender and a gown of stitched-together mats sipped calmly from a cup that steamed in rainbow tendrils. A boy no older than Clara, his skin the deep green of willow leaves, balanced a biscuit on the nose of a fox wearing a waistcoat. An old man with a clock embedded in his chest, tick-tick-ticking like a second heartbeat, laughed as a floating spoon dribbled jam onto his napkin. Ah, the guest of honor. The lavender-haired woman turned, her eyes twin constellations, and Clara's breath hitched. The woman patted the empty seat beside her, where a porcelain plate waited, engraved with Clara's name in swirling script. "We've been expecting you, dear." Clara's feet moved without permission. "Expecting me? But I don't even know what this is." "Midnight tea," said the boy with green skin, tossing a fox a makara. "For the dreamers who aren't sleeping." "And the sleepers who aren't dreaming," chimed the old man, tapping his clock chest. A tiny door opened above the hour hand, and a mechanical songbird popped out, trilling a melody Clara swore she'd heard in a lullaby long ago. The woman poured tea into Clara's cup, a liquid that shifted from blue to gold to violet, like ink spilled in sunlight. "Drink, child, the first sip is always the bravest." Clara hesitated. The stories her mother told always warned of fairy tricks, of treats that trapped humans in endless dances or turned their hearts to stone. But the warmth of the cup seeped into her palms, and the smell, oh, the smell was her mother's kitchen on Christmas morning, cinnamon and cloves, and something indefinably kind. She drank. The world a blurred. Suddenly, she was floating above the table, her body weightless, her mind unspooling like thread. The lanterns swelled into miniature suns, the oak tree's roots writhed and bloomed into velvet armchairs, and the stars began to sing. No, not the stars. The tea. The tea was singing, a chorus of 1,000 voices, some familiar, some ancient, all weaving a story about it. Her. A story of a girl who collected lost things, bottle caps, bird bones, whispers caught in jam jars. A girl whose loneliness was a seed that grew into a tea. A girl who didn't know yet that teas could open more than doors. "What is this?" Clara gasped as the vision released her, gentle as a falling petal. The woman smiled. "A dreaming hour, a little pocket of time where lost things find their way home." She gestured to the table. "We meet when the world is balanced between yesterday and tomorrow, when hearts are light enough to float. You've been invited, Clara Bellamy, because you've forgotten how to dream, and we," she added, nodding at the odd assembly, "are here to remind you." The boy leaned forward, his mossy fingers brushing Clara's wrist. "Plus, the snacks are fantastic." Clara laughed, a startled, rusty sound she hadn't heard from herself in years. The fox yipped in approval, the clockwork songbird harmonized, and the tea party carried on, weaving Clara into its tapestry of warmth and whimsy. But as the night deepened, Clara noticed things. The lavender-haired woman's match flickered, continents dissolving like sugar in tea. The boy's green skin paled at the edges, flaking like old paint. Even the lanterns dimmed intermittently, as if the magic were a fraying. "Nothing lasts forever," the old man said quietly when he caught her staring at his faltering clock. "Not even midnight." By the time the first birdsong trilled in the distance, the party was fading. The guests exchanged wistful smiles, gathering crumbs and memories into their pockets. "Will you come back?" the boy asked Clara as he fed the fox one last biscuit. She glanced at the dying lanterns, the table now half transparent. "Can I?" The woman squeezed her hand. "Midnight is a door, dear. You need only knock." Then the sun crested the horizon, and the tea party vanished, along with the lanterns, the table, and the guests. Only the scent of bergamot lingered, and a single teacup in Clara's hand, still warm. She returned to her attic room, climbed into bed, and slept, truly slept, for the first time in years. And when she dreamed, it was of maps that led to lavender skies and foxes who told jokes in rhyme. But in the corner of her dream, unnoticed, a shadow flickered. Something hungry, something watching. And it liked the taste of dreams. How the story could unfold? Characters to develop. Each tea party guest has a hidden sorrow. For example, the boy is slowly turning into a tree, the clock chest man is running out of time. A conflict, the shadow in Clara's dream, is a weaver of nightmares draining the magic of the tea party. Guests begin disappearing. A climaxa, Clara must rebuild the tea party's magic by helping guests confront their fears, using her talent for collecting lost things to recover stolen dreams. Wending, the tea party becomes a symbol of resilience. Clara finds a way to keep its spirit alive in the waking world, honoring her mother's stories. The forest breathed softly as dusk settled, painting the sky in streaks of lavender and burnt orange. Shadows stretched like lazy cats across the mossy ground, and the air hummed with the drowsy chatter of crickets tuning their legs for the evening symphony. Somewhere in the heart of the woods, where the ferns grew tall enough to hide secrets, and the creek whispered riddles to the stones, a small bear named Snuggly sat on his haunches, squinting at the twilight. His fur was the color of toasted marshmallows, patched with mud from a day spent digging for truffles, and his nose twitched as he sniffed the breeze. It was almost time. Snuggly had never been good at waiting. His paws fidgeted, clawing at the pebbles by the creek, and his stubby tail wagged like a metronome set to impatient. But tonight was special. Tonight, the fireflies would come. He'd heard about them for years, from Old Owl, who'd described their glow as starlight spun into wings, and from Luna the fox, who'd once chased a swarm into a meadow and returned wide-eyed, muttering about dancing lanterns. Snuggly had tried to catch a glimpse last summer, but he'd fallen asleep under a blackberry bush, his belly full of sour berries and his paws sticky with sap. This year, he vowed, would be different. A cool wind rustled through the birch trees, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Snuggly's ears perked. Somewhere beyond the thicket, a lone firefly flickered, a tiny, tentative pulse of green. His heart thumped. There. He scrambled to his feet, tripping over a root in his haste, and barreled toward the light. But by the time he'd untangled himself from a curtain of ivy, the firefly had vanished. Snuggly huffed, kicking a clump of moss. "Blinky tricks," he grumbled. A chuckle rippled through the air, light and melodic, like water over polished glass. "You're too loud, Bear," said a voice. Snuggly spun around, nearly toppling sideways. Perched on a low branch above him was a creature he'd never seen before, a slender, iridescent lizard with scales that shimmered like oil on water. Her tail coiled elegantly around the wood, and her eyes glowed a soft, moonlit silver. "Poor you?" Snuggly blurted, tilting his head. The lizard flicked her forked tongue, amused. "I'm Nim," she said. "I've been watching you stomp around this creek for an hour. If you want to catch a firefly, you'll need more than enthusiasm, you need." She paused, leaning closer. "A strategy?" Snuggly blinked. "Strategy?" "Strategy?" Nin corrected, rolling her eyes. "Fireflies aren't just lights, you know, they're storytellers. Their glows are a language, a map of wishes and warnings. You have to listen?" She leapt down, landing soundlessly on a rock. "Follow me and try not to sound like a buffalo in a teacup shop." Snuggly hesitated, eyeing her warily. But the woods were deepening into velvet darkness, and the first true fireflies had begun to rise, flickering embers winking in and out of existence. He nodded, patting after Nim as she slithered into the underbrush. The forest transformed at night. Familiar paths became labyrinths of shadow, and the chorus of owls, frogs, and rustling leaves welled into a lullaby. Nim guided him to a clearing where the fireflies swarmed in earnest, their bodies weaving constellations mere inches above the grass. Snuggly gasped. Hundreds of them darted and spiraled, their glow shifting from gold to green to blue, as if painting the air with brushstrokes of light. "No," Nim whispered. "Hold very still, let them come to you." Snuggly froze, his breath shallow. A firefly hovered near his nose, its wings a blur. He crossed his eyes trying to look at it, and the bug zipped away. Another landed on his ear, its light pulsing gently. He felt a giggle bubble up but swallowed it, remembering Nim's advice. A patience. Minutes passed. Then, as if the fireflies had voted in unison, they began to alight on Snuggly's fur, his shoulders, his paws, the tip of his nose. He became a shaggy constellation, a bear-shaped galaxy glowing softly in the dark. Nim watched, her silver eyes crinkling. "They like you," she said. "You're warm." Snuggly grinned, careful not to disturb his luminous guests. "What are they saying the stories?" Nim tilted her head, listening to the rhythmic flickers. "This one," she pointed to a firefly on his knee, "is recounting the tale of the first spark when the moon lost a piece of herself and sent it to Earth to keep the dark at bay. That one, a blue glowing bud near his ear, is gossiping about a moth who fell in love with a candle." Snuggly's heart swelled. He'd never imagined bugs could be so interesting. "How do you understand them?" "Practice," Nim said simply. "And quietness. The world speaks in whispers, Bear. You just have to stop roaring long enough to hear." By midnight, the fireflies drifted away, returning to their hidden nests in the hollows of trees. Snuggly trudged back to his den, exhaustion tugging at his limbs, but his mind buzzing with wonder. He collapsed onto his bed of dried ferns, replaying the night in his head, the shimmering scales, the dance of lights, the stories etched in glow. As he drifted to sleep, a resolve crystallized in his chest. He would learn the language of the fireflies. He would become not just a collector of their light, but a keeper of their tales. And maybe, if he listened closely enough, he'd discover why they'd chosen him. Outside, the forest hummed with secrets, and the first chapter of Snuggly Bear's Guide began with a single flicker in the dark. This opening establishes Snuggly's curiosity, introduces a mystical mentor in Nim, and sets up the broader quest to understand the firefly's magic. The story could unfold as a meandering, episodic journey through the forest, with Snuggly encountering other creatures, a poetry-writing badger, a hedgehog obsessed with constellations, unraveling mysteries. Why are the fireflies dimming? Who is leaving tiny, glowing footprints near the waterfall, and learning that kindness and attentiveness are the truest tools for catching light. The tone would balance cozy charm with subtle stakes. Think of the wind in the willows meets over the garden wall. Let me know if you'd like to explore specific arcs or themes. The ocean breathed. Its sighs rolled outward in ripples of indigo and silver, stretching endlessly under a sky smudged with the last blush of sunset. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a trail of molten gold that dissolved into the depths, and the sea, ever a devoted mirror, softened its waves into gentle swells. This was the hour when the water turned storyteller, when currents hummed melodies older than coral reefs, and the moon's pale fingers stirred the tides into a lullaby. Beneath the surface, the world slowed. Schools of glittering sardines, darting like shards of daylight only moments before, now drifted in drowsy spirals. Their scales flickered faintly, mimicking the stars beginning to pepper the sky above. A sea turtle, her leathery flippers weighted by centuries of wisdom, settled into a cradle of seagrass, her eyelids sinking as the sand whispered secrets only the oldest creatures could understand. Even the octopus, that restless trickster, coiled itself into a crevice, its tentacles curling like fern fronds in a breeze. The ocean's pulse was steady here. A heartbeat felt through the thrum of water, the sway of kelp forests, the distant echo of whale song, a sound so deep it vibrated in the bones of the world. The waves took up their duty without haste. They had done this since the first tides swelled under the gaze of a newborn moon. With each lap against the shore, they untangled the knots of the day. Foam fizzed like champagne, popping softly as it carried away the remnants of storms and squabbles, of crabs scuttling too greedily and seagulls diving too sharply. The waves knew the art of gentleness. They brushed over anemones, persuading their vibrant tendrils to fold inward, and swept the jagged edges off the day's chaos, turning it into something smooth, something dreamlike. In the shallows, a family of clownfish nestled into their anemone home, its stinging embrace now a warm cocoon. The smallest fry, still speckled with youth, wriggled impatiently until the current swept a melody through their tendril-guarded sanctuary, a tune spun from the sigh of seashells and the murmur of abyssal trenches. The fry stilled, lulled by a song it couldn't name, but had always known. Deeper down, where sunlight dared not linger, bioluminescent jellyfish pulsed like slow blinking lanterns, their glow dimming as the waves' rhythm seeped into the dark. Their light faded, but the water itself seemed to hum, a subaquatic hymn that wrapped around drowsy eels and dozing lobsters alike. Far offshore, a pod of humpback whales drifted vertically, suspended in the midnight blue void. Their songs, complex and haunting, had quieted to low, resonant croons that harmonized with the creak of icebergs and the groan of continental shells. A calf nuzzled against its mother's side, her massive fin cradling it as the waves above translated the wind's whispers into something sweeter, something deeper. The ocean's lullaby was not sung in words, but in movements, in the curl of a crest breaking into foam, in the swirl of plankton dancing like fairies, in the pressure of depths holding the world together. And as the moon climbed, so did the tide, tucking the shorelines into blankets of wet sand. Hermit crabs, having scuttled all day in their scavengers' hustle, refracted into their borrowed shells, dreaming of pearly treasures and bottomless reefs. Starfish melted into the rocks, their edges blurring as sleep took hold. Even the barnacles, those stubborn tenants of hulls and boulders, ceased their endless filtering, their feathery arms stilled. The seafloor itself seemed to sigh, sediment settling like snow in a globe, while the lullaby swelled, a chorus of wave over wave, a promise that the dark was not something to fear, but to embrace, a cradle rocked by the hands of the infinite. The ocean breathed, and all within it dreamed. Once upon a time, in a kingdom nestled between rolling green hills and misty blue rivers, there was a grand castle unlike any other. Unlike the cold, stone fortresses of other lands, this castle was made entirely of the softest, coziest blankets. Towers rose high, woven from silken threads, their peaks rippling gently in the wind. Walls were stacked with thick layers of plush fabric, and the floors were padded with cloud-like cushions. Inside, halls stretched wide and open, with ceilings draped in velvety sheets that shimmered in the golden light of the chandeliers. This was the castle of cozy blankets, a place of warmth, comfort, and dreams. Every room was a haven of softness, where one could sink into feathery beds, wrap themselves in endless layers of comfort, and drift into the sweetest slumber. The air was always filled with a soothing scent of lavender and vanilla, and the only sounds that filled the castle were the gentle rustling of silk, the faint hum of lullabies, and the occasional sigh of deep, restful sleep. But within this kingdom of comfort, there was one soul who could not find peace. Princess Lila, the daughter of King Rafik and Queen Mariam, was the only one in the entire land who could not sleep. No matter how many blankets she wrapped herself in, no matter how many lullabies were sung to her, and no matter how soft her bed was made, sleep would not come to her. Every night, she lay awake, staring at the moonlit canopy above her, listening to the soft murmurs of the sleeping castle. Her eyes would grow heavy, but the moment she was about to drift into dreams, something would stir her awake. Her parents, desperate to help their daughter, called upon the wisest healers, the most skilled dream weavers, and the most talented storytellers in the land. They brought enchanted pillows stuffed with feathers from the wings of nightingales, brewed teas made from the rarest sleep-inducing herbs, and even summoned the Dream Guardian, a mystical being said to guide lost souls into the realm of slumber. But nothing worked. The princess remained sleepless, trapped in endless nights of wakefulness. As time passed, the kingdom grew more and more troubled. The castle of cozy blankets was a place built upon the very essence of rest and relaxation, and if the princess herself could not sleep, then what did it mean for the magic of the castle? Whispers began to spread through the kingdom, carrying tales of an old legend that spoke of a curse that would awaken once the purest heart in the castle failed to dream. The people feared that if the princess remained awake, the magic that kept their land peaceful and serene would slowly begin to fade away. Determined to find a cure, Princess Layla embarked on a journey to uncover the truth behind her sleeplessness. She roamed the hidden corridors of the castle, searching for answers in forgotten scrolls and ancient tapestries. She spoke to the oldest of the castle's caretakers, hoping to find a clue in their stories. One night, as she wandered through the deepest chamber of the castle, she stumbled upon a hidden door, a door unlike any other, woven entirely from threads of midnight blue and embroidered with silver stars that seemed to twinkle under her touch. A strange feeling washed over her as she pushed the door open. The air inside was different, colder, heavier, filled with something she could not quite name. At the center of the chamber stood a mirror, its surface rippling like water, reflecting not her face, but an endless sky filled with countless stars. As she stepped closer, a whisper filled the room, a voice, soft as a sigh, speaking her name. "Layla," it murmured. "You do not belong to the world of sleep, you are the keeper of wakefulness, the guardian of the unseen hours." A shiver ran down her spine. She had never heard of such a thing before. She reached out to touch the mirror, and the moment her fingers brushed against its surface, a wave of memories crashed over her. She saw glimpses of another world, a realm beyond sleep, a place where the lost hours of the night gathered, where dreams that never took form floated like mist, waiting for someone to give them shape. As the visions faded, Layla found herself trembling. She had spent her whole life searching for sleep, never realizing that she was never meant to sleep at all. She was not cursed, she was chosen. Chosen to walk between dreams and wakefulness, to guide the dreams of others while never dreaming herself. When she emerged from the chamber, the castle felt different. The air was lighter, the magic stronger. The people, who had once feared her sleeplessness, now looked upon her with wonder. She was not a lost soul wandering in search of sleep. She was the protector of their dreams, the one who ensured that the castle of cozy blankets remained a place of warmth and comfort for all. From that night forward, Princess Layla embraced her role. She wandered the castle as its silent guardian, watching over the sleeping kingdom, weaving dreams into the air, ensuring that the magic of rest never faded. She became a legend, a figure whispered about in bedtime stories, the princess who never slept but watched over all who did. And so the castle of cozy blankets remained the most peaceful place in the world, cradled in the gentle hands of its sleepless princess.